We have record registration today, so you will see box upon box of like-minded individuals today. We're so glad that you're with us. Karen and I are excited to be with you and be together. Welcome. I'll give everybody just a little bit longer to get here.
So many familiar faces. Hey, y'all.
Know it. Okay. It is noon on the dot here in Southwest Florida. Karen and I are super excited to be with you today, but before we even get started, we just want to let you know that we are struggling with some thunderstorms here. And so it's awfully gloomy. We think it's subsiding, but we both have had touch and go internet. So just know that if one of us freezes or our internet's lagging, that we have a team here to continue the conversation. So we'll do our very best to mitigate the storm. Before we introduce ourselves for those that are new, I just want to take a second and really honor our COO, Kylie Heap. Last month, she did a dynamic webinar for us where she interviewed several really key players on the peripheral of the abortion healing movement. And it was really interesting to be on the outside looking in, but she did a fantastic job. And you guys seem to be very intrigued by the content that she was able to draw out of those leaders. So we are really thrilled. If you have not yet seen it, we keep those recordings for you to watch at your leisure. So we'll put that in the link into the chat feature for you so you can go back. And if you're signed up for our emails, you're already getting the recorded content. So we're happy that you're here live with us. As a reminder, make sure that you are muted. We'll help you if you need to. You can keep your video on or turn it off. If you are open to it, we'd love for you to put your name in your box, make sure that you are identifying with your name so others can see you as well, especially when you begin to ask questions. And then if you're comfortable in the chat box right now, if you'll introduce yourself, maybe share where you're coming from, what organization you represent, and any other information that you'd like those that are going through the chat to connect with. A lot of times this is an opportunity for you to network with people in your community, with people that have similar interests or similar questions. And so we want to make sure that we utilize that to the best of your ability and our ability as well. We'll be communicating through the chat feature as well as questions come up. Our team's in the background doing that. We'll share links there and make sure that you have everything that we're talking about today. So before we begin, I just want to let you know that Karen and I, Karen really is the impetus behind Support After Abortion. If it wasn't for her, we all would not be here today. And so Karen comes with tons of authority in this space, and I feel super honored to be able to be with her and to be able to be sharing this specific content with you today. We also feel really honored that we kind of get to share from different perspectives and different experiences. So we hope that you'll kind of get the spectrum on the topic that we're bringing to you today. I see somebody trying to share their screen. I'm hoping Kylie or Ivy, you can help Stella Johnston stop sharing her screen so we can continue to see everyone. So without further ado, Karen, I'm going to turn it over to you. If you'll share with everybody a little bit about your background and why the authority exists within your mind and your heart for this topic specifically.
Yeah, well, thank you, Lisa. I never thought I would be sitting in this chair. I was a nuclear engineering technician for most of my career until life kind of went sideways for me. And I decided to go back to college for social work because my perspective and my perception just changed. And so it was in 2017, and I applied for a job at a pregnancy center. Who knew why? I didn't have any children, or so I thought at the time. And so I applied, and I was asked if I had ever been pregnant, and I said yes. And they asked me the outcome, and I said I had an abortion. And they said, "Have you ever been through healing?" And I'm like, "Healing? What's that?" Like, well, there's a thing called abortion healing, and
Dame beso, te amo.
We would like you.
Bye, amor. ¿Estás con el teléfono?
We're going to pause real quick, and Ivy or Kylie can, there you go. Okay, keep going, Karen. Excuse us for that.
they said, well, if you want the job, you got to go through healing. And I said, no, I'm good, man. I've been in recovery. I was an alcoholic and an addict, and I cleaned up my side of the street. I made amends. I'm good. And they said, well, we know you're good, but you're going to do it anyway. So I went through healing, and I had no idea how not okay I was. I mean, lies that I had believed for decades came to the surface. I mean, the biggest one being that I'm not a mom. I used to tell myself all the time, I'm never going to be a mom. And the realization hit me, struck me like being shot with a shotgun, like, you are a mom. Karen, you are a mom. And so that's why I'm here, man. That transformational healing that I experienced, even in that first support group that I went through, changed my life forever. I couldn't go back to being or thinking how I used to. And so I was tasked with the job of trying to figure out what healing was in our local area, or at least in South Florida. And that's when we discovered, and what we did at the pregnancy center where I was hired, is we had in-person support groups. You always had to be with other people. You either walked into a church or into a pregnancy center in order to engage in that support group. And they were all religious. I mean, all the ones that I ever saw people facilitating, and even the ones that we facilitated, were religious in nature. And we did them twice a year, in April and October. And it seems to be like that around the country. I'm not really sure why. And so that's why we're having this conversation today about clinical support versus group readiness. And so now I'm going to turn it back over to Lisa, and she can tell you a little bit about her.
Yeah. And so what I love about our blendedness today is that Karen brings the personal experience, having had an abortion. She brings years of therapy that she engaged in, recovery processing, all of these things that she personally walked through, and then invited into the abortion healing space, took her own healing and then advanced it so that we can bring it to you, because she really was the one that started investigating, the different programs that were being offered, why not many people were reaching out for help, what we could do better. And so she personally went through each of these programs. I think, Karen, what was it, 10? Are we at 10 now? Right. So retreat programs, Bible studies, in person. So she really brings this personal perspective and peer leader perspective as well. And then coupled with my experience as a licensed professional, licensed clinician, we really bring this opportunity to you to kind of show you the spectrum wherever you are on your journey, both personally healing, but also helping others heal. We're here to really talk to you about, from different perspectives, what we saw and what we continue to see in this space as we serve men and women who've been impacted by abortion. So as the CEO of Support After Abortion, I've kind of been in a lot of different places. And one of the places I'm going to really pull from today, and Karen as well, is the facilitation of groups in our program. In 2021, when COVID hit and everything, what was it, 44 groups, Karen, that we led that year? Right. And Karen and I did a lot of those groups, along with some of you, some of our volunteers, some of our other staff. And so we're leaning on that information, as well as what we hear on our call line, and then also what we've learned through our research. So we're bringing a resource to you that brings all of that together, that we really feel like could be very, very life-changing for you. And before we enter into talking about that resource, we kind of just wanted to set the framework for what is a group. Why are we delineating between a group and individual, and what kinds of things we want to kind of just have as a precedent as we enter into the tool that we're about to introduce you to. So maybe, Karen, you, from your perspective, can first start and tell us what are groups to you? What do they look like? How have they felt, maybe personally and professionally?
That's a really great question. Groups are obviously more than one person. It always used to be done in person, as I said before. So you're walking into a room with people that you've never met before. It can be very intimidating. And quite often people stop at the door and have to gather themselves together before they can even enter. So it can be somewhat intimidating. Even with virtual groups, which is how so many of them happen since COVID, hit us. Even virtual groups, when you're going into that very first meeting with people that you've never met before. And let me tell you, let me just start out by saying people prefer anonymity. Our research shows that. And so they prefer not engaging in groups in their community because they could know somebody maybe that walks through that door with them, or could be seen walking into a church building or something like that. And so we have found that virtual preserves anonymity in a much greater way. The other thing that I know about groups is that they can be really emotional, right? And so that's why it's so important to make sure that the people that you're serving, and that I know you all want to serve well, are group ready, meaning that they're going to be able to sit and listen to other people share their story, because I've seen people triggered before by hearing something that someone else said. And so that's why we really developed this tool that we're going to share with you in just a little bit. Also, as a facilitator in groups, it's our responsibility to create a safe environment so that the group dynamic can unfold naturally, right? But then there's some people that will violate ground rules. And I hope that if you guys offer group support, that you have some ground rules. Somebody can monopolize the conversation or use language that somebody's not used to hearing. And so to prepare and bring forth expectations to your group participants of what could potentially occur within the group will help position them to be more ready. I hope that's what you were looking for, Lisa.
Awesome. Yeah. And so from a more clinical lens, I would say that facilitating a group is probably one of the more difficult things that my interns will do in their journey of learning how to facilitate groups. And the reasons are just like what we hear from what Karen said. There's group dynamics that we need to take into consideration. If you have 4, 5, 6 people in a group, you have 4, 5, 6 different personalities. They're coming with different expectations, different needs for that group that day. And if you aren't trained, and if they're not ready, it can be a very toxic place for some people if we're not very careful with that. But on the other side of that, groups are one of my favorite things to do, because what we can gain from being with one another, what we learn when we realize that we're not alone on a journey that feels so isolating, is huge. And you can only really gain that when you're with other people that have shared experiences. So it's a beautiful opportunity, but it also takes a lot of skill, and it also takes a lot of intentionality about setting it up for success and making sure that as the leader that we provide a safe space and we stick to what we say we're going to stick to. So like Karen said, if there's a rule that we're not going to talk over anybody, and in the first 10 minutes somebody does and you don't say anything, you're likely setting that group up for a dangerous place. And so it's really important that as a facilitator, you're ready for that, but then that your clients are able to receive that feedback and then continue through the group.
Can I add something to that, Lisa? Because you touched on it, and I think it's so important that when facilitation is done well and people feel safe, magic happens. Maybe that's not the best word, but transformation happens, that people realize that they're not alone in the way that they feel. They realize by hearing other people's testimonies that they can relate to that, man, I'm not the only one that's gone through this. I'm not the only one that didn't tell anybody. It's just, it brings the groups so close together that what we also see in dynamics is as the group's about to end, people get really nervous because they've just made this friendship, they've connected with each other, and now they're going to be done. And so they always ask, and I really encourage you to make sure that you have next steps in place for people so that they can continue on the healing journey, because it's not a one and done. It's a lifetime investment.
Right. And we always encourage all of our volunteers, and for my interns, for me, for Karen, that you would go be a participant in a group before you ever lead a group, so that you understand the vulnerability, you understand what happens inside of that experience. So if you're listening now and that's not been part of your journey, let me encourage you today to take that as maybe one of those things that you do in the next several months, is that you would enlist, and not necessarily in a Bible study, but more something that is more personal to you, more healing in nature, that would allow you to understand what it feels like to get out of that left brain, that logic brain, and really get into your right brain, where you have stored experiences, maybe positive or negative, where you can work through those in the dynamics of a group. It's very fascinating. And for me, humbling, Karen, having, sat in lots of groups for my own personal healing, being able to let those places that are really vulnerable inside me out in front of other people. It took a lot of courage, but then when I finally did, it felt so relieving. What has your experience been as a participant in a group?
Gosh, I mean, I saw Jackie here. I mean, I did Deeper Still, which is a weekend retreat. It was the most intimate encounter that I've ever had. And I mean, I sobbed like a baby, you know what I mean? Like it wasn't pretty, it was messy, but it was I walked out of there feeling just changed.
Yeah.
If you really allow yourself to be open to whatever's to be revealed to you and to work through whatever comes up for you, do you know what I mean? And press into that pain. I mean, it really does change you, and for the better, always for the better. I love it. I would do any kind of healing group that I can, because I love becoming more self-aware, and I'm okay with not being perfectly put together, right? Like,
yeah. But Karen, it's taken you a long time, and me too, to get to that place where you celebrate the spaces in you that still are being healed. When we meet our clients for the first time, sometimes they are not ready to be in that place of exposure. They haven't really learned what it is to heal. Maybe they don't trust people because most everyone in their life has hurt them. What would you say, as we're getting ready to unleash this tool, for that client that might not have that same mentality as you, that isn't ready for a group? Like what should we think about as we're preparing to talk to somebody like that?
Yeah, I think this assessment that we've created will get us to a place to understand if it's just that they're scared and they never really looked into it. I've had people that really, it took me almost the entire group to get them to open up, let's just say, surrounding anger, right? Like their upbringing was something that I would have been extremely angry about, and they had forgiven everybody and they didn't have any anger, kind of like me when I said that I'm good, I don't need any healing yet. You don't know what you don't know. And so somebody like that just isn't in touch with something, I think we would determine through these questions that they are group ready. It might take a little bit to draw them out more. And that's the facilitators. You know me, y'all. If so many of you know me, like I will call you out if you're not responding, if you're not, participating in the group. I'll ask you some questions to find out what's going on. And so I think that this tool will really help us to differentiate between, is somebody just kind of blocked off, or does somebody really need to go into professional therapy to get to the source of whatever it is that's blocking them? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And for the sake of naming the experience that many of you have had in this industry, we really have not had a separate model up until this point. For most of you, a one model that you've either healed from or that has been offered in your community. It's likely been in person, like Karen said, and it's likely required group participation. And so some of you have felt like, gosh, I don't have enough people in the group, so we're not going to lead the group. Now what? And I would say that let that be an indication that maybe you have people that aren't ready for group healing, that need a more individualized approach. And you guys have heard Support After Abortion really stand behind this, is that we've got to meet our clients right where they are. And that might not mean a group right away. And so that tool is really going to help us to maybe shift the paradigm that many of us are coming from, that here's our group practice that we've always done. And perhaps today you might be awakened to other ways, or ways in which only that approach might not be the best approach for everyone that you want to serve.
Right. That's good. That's well said. Do you want me to share my screen? Are we ready?
Ready? Drum roll, please. Here's our tool.
This works. I'm not the most tech person. Please, Jesus. Okay. Why is my screen sharing paused? I don't understand this. Can somebody help me? Kylie, do I need permission to be able to share my screen?
No, it seems to be a local issue. There might be something on your screen that says pause or start or play.
Record.
Maybe Kylie, you can share the screen. Do you have the document?
I'll send it to her right now. So keep talking, Lisa. Give me a minute.
Okay. So as we prepare this for you, I want to let you know that we worked really hard with one of my colleagues, Greg Hassick, because he was sensitive to the fact that a lot of his clients, he's a mental health therapist as well, he was sensitive to the fact that a lot of our clients were going to these weekend retreats, or they were going to these group experiences for abortion healing, and their families didn't know what they were doing. They were going to these experiences and then coming home to the same family that didn't know what they were doing. They were limited with social supports. So the group was very helpful and facilitated great experiences for them. But the people that they were then re-entering with weren't that way. And so he wants to make sure, he wanted, and he still does, wants to make sure that the way in which we provide abortion healing is looking at the entire system, is not opening a wound and then sending somebody back where they could be harmed again. And so this tool was really designed as a way of saying, let's make sure we mitigate that. Let's make sure we understand where our clients are, who they've spoken to. We have these intentional questions regarding their history, their mental health history, their behaviors, these sort of things, because sometimes we're not asking these questions. And admittedly, this is a space that I was not asking questions in for the better part of a decade. And so we figured it out, and I'm really thrilled. Thank you for the team for doing that. So let's start with the first question. If you'll scroll down first for me, all the way down, just so you can see that this is a point system. So we really try to create a black and white scoring system for you so that you have guardrails, if you will, as to who's ready for group and who's not. I would want to preface this with saying that you're with that person. And so if something doesn't feel right or other things, and they still scored in a place that they're ready for group, I would listen to that intuition more than I would listen to the score, or that I would reach out for help from us or from other colleagues that you value their input as to what it is that you're experiencing, so that you make sure that you make a good decision in that realm. All right, thank you for that. So let's unpack this first question, Karen. The first question is, it seems so silly, and maybe you can help us understand why we would even ask this. But the question is, have you been a part or been affected by your own or someone else's abortions? Talk to us about this question and why it's important.
It's really important because people, there are some people that would answer no to this when they have been affected by someone else's abortion and just don't put the two together, right? Like somebody that, like my roommate, lent me the money, that could have impacted her, and she could potentially grieve that loss of her friend's child, right? Or it could be that mother that went to the clinic with their daughter that was abortion minded because she didn't want her to go through it alone, right? So this question, if somebody really hasn't had an abortion or been impacted, then they don't need to be assessed. And unless they're doing it just for their own personal growth, and because they want to become a facilitator or something like that, there's really no reason for them to participate in a healing group. Unless they did want to become a facilitator. But I think this just really speaks to, I just facilitated a group of people, and there was 2 women in there that had been affected by someone else, but had been part of somebody else's abortion experience and never had ever even considered the impact on themselves.
Yeah. So we want to just really start by naming what it is that we're assessing for. And so we really want to ask the question directly. Sometimes in our society, many of you don't experience this, but we know that this tool will go far and wide. Saying the word abortion, it's like we whisper it, right? We still have yet to get comfortable with this conversation. And so by asking this question, it allows the person that's facilitating this survey to begin growing their comfort level in doing this, but also helping the recipient to get comfortable with negotiating this conversation as well. So we want to name this from the very beginning. Much like a medical doctor, some of you have heard me say this, they need a diagnosis. We need to know what we're treating so that we can provide the prescription, right? And so it's really important that we understand what it is we're talking about. I'm a male. I experienced 3 abortions. One I helped facilitate. The second one I didn't know about till 10 years ago. And this last year, my wife and I experienced abortion together, right? We made the decision together. We need to talk about that. Those are 3 individualized experiences that we want to have a pulse on as we're negotiating the process with the client.
Can I just point out just for a moment, I see some formatting issues here. I apologize for that. If you notice, like on question 1, the A and the yes should be on the next line. And I see again on question 3 that we have some formatting. We'll make sure that we get this out to you and it's properly prepared for you. I apologize for how it looks.
That's our perfectionist, Karen. Karen, I love it. Okay, question number 2. Are you open to moving on, Karen?
Yes.
Okay.
So how about if I read this one and you answer it?
You got
Have
it.
you attended counseling, abortion healing, or other programming to address the impact it has had on you? Why is that an important question, Lisa?
Powerful, because oftentimes we become so solar focused on the issue that's in front of us. So should this gentleman, for example, that we just talked about in question 1, share these 3 experiences with us, we want to understand, has he gone through healing for any of those experiences? Has he been in counseling for any other reasons? And is he in a male group for some reason, or any other programming that is working alongside? So often we just become so focused that we don't see the whole person. And we want to make sure to take a few steps back so that we can see the whole person. So we really know what it is that they're focused on, what it is that they're working through, and what kind of supports have they had along their journey. And could this be their first group as they're continuing to unpack their abortion experiences?
That's really good.
Yeah. All right. Question number 3, Karen. Are you now, or have you in the past, and this is really important because you've been right on the front lines with people, had thoughts of harming yourself or others? Why is this question so important?
It's really important. And if you were asking me this question today, I would say yes. In the past, I've had thoughts of harming myself. And so when we're assessing somebody's group readiness, we need to better understand what that actually means. We have a former colleague, her name was Amy. She struggles with suicide, has attempted it, and she has taught us that there's a huge difference between thinking about suicide and actually having a plan in place to carry it out. And so this is one of the strongest questions that we have on this assessment. If somebody says yes now, then we think that it would be much better for them to see a clinician to talk about that and talk through that before we get them into a group where those triggers of suicidal thoughts and ideation come about because of somebody saying something that triggers them. So this has got 3 options to it. Yes, now is the heaviest way. Yes, in the past, we still want to consider that because we want to better understand what that means. And we have some follow-up questions depending on how people answer some of these questions, just to really get to the bottom of it and figure out what's really going on with them.
Right. And Karen, I just want to interject that you had permission to share such a private thing about Amy. We put that in the chat and wanted everyone to know that that's something that Amy was comfortable with us sharing. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
And Amy leads, she's been a volunteer on the suicidal hotline. She leads trainings here in our local community. So she is a breath of wisdom personally and professionally. She's also a clinician. And so her experience in this space has really informed us. There's been times, Karen, I want to unpack this a little bit more, where we've been in group. We didn't ask this question. This was years ago. And then in the group, a client says, I have not been feeling well. I've been in really dark places, and I've been thinking about what it might be to not be here anymore. How would you recommend if let's say, people are leading groups right now, didn't think to ask this question, or do ask this question, the person says no, and then halfway through the group, that changes. What would you recommend we do?
Well, so from my perspective, I'm not a therapist, so I can't really have that conversation with somebody like that. I would recommend the suicide hotline. I would perhaps even see if I could get their permission to call the suicide hotline so they could speak to a professional who's been trained on that kind of topic. I could refer them to you, Lisa. You're a clinician, and perhaps you could talk with them about that. But as a layperson facilitating support groups, I'm not trained to do that. And I don't want to take on a clinical kind of role when I'm not equipped to do that. But I would try to get them connected to the support that they could really benefit from.
Right. And we always want to do no harm. It's a recovery practice that we offer it to you, that if being in the group is providing greater harm to that individual, that maybe we suggest a timeout. And then, as Karen said, that we would enlist different professional support to help that person as they're walking through it. And so if you don't feel like you have the tools or the community around you that is qualified to serve somebody who is experiencing darker thoughts, we want to make sure that you hear that today, that don't do it alone. It's never a best practice to try to navigate that alone. And you should have somebody that you can lean on that has the qualifications to help navigate something like that.
Yeah.
All right. Fourth question, Karen. Are you currently seeing a mental health therapist? Now, with everything we've unpacked, this kind of makes sense that this lands on here, but maybe you can help us understand why that's an important question.
Well, that's an important question so that we can ask question 5 in all honesty. We got to find out if somebody's in therapy now or has been in the past in order to find out if their therapist supports them participating in an abortion healing group. We never want to step on the toes of a therapist if they don't feel like they should be doing dual healing at the same time kind of thing. So we really want to get the therapist's buy-in to say, yes, I think you should go. This is specific. Abortion healing is specific. It's just part of the overall therapy that you're getting from the professional. And perhaps the therapist doesn't have the qualifications or doesn't have the knowledge about abortion, the impact of abortion on somebody emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, physically. And so that's why question 4 is there, is just to be able to get to question 5.
Yeah, absolutely. So oftentimes my experience has been that abortion is sometimes the reason why people reach out, but more times than not, it's been a secondary reason, right? Because of the way that our culture has polarized abortion, it's not the most common thing people reach out for. There's shame connected to that and so many other things that most of you understand. So we've actually spoken to our clients who say, I'd rather talk about my sexual abuse first before I talk about my abortion experience. Why is that? Because I was a victim of sexual abuse. And from their perspective, their involvement with the abortion was their decision. Now, that's not everybody's story, but these are just some of the things we've heard over the years that why this would be the case. And so as we're navigating the abortion issue in a client's journey, we want to know what are you going to therapy for, and what are you working on in that therapeutic environment? How would this help you to be here with the therapy that you're already receiving? And should you do both at the same time? Some clients can. They have complete capacity. They're in a place that they just want to get to the root of all of their stuff and heal. And then other people are working through really big issues throughout their journey. And so adding abortion healing might seem good in that moment, but we want to be the professionals and say, hey, if you're walking through a divorce and your child just overdosed on drugs, like, let's really look at where this conversation fits into your healing journey as they're negotiating all of the opportunities for healing. Okay, number 6, Karen, are you currently experiencing any other symptoms or stressors in life, like depression, anxiety, addictions, domestic violence, relationship issues, homelessness, unemployment, recent trauma or loss, other than the abortion experiences that you're here for?
That's a lot of question right there, isn't it? It's really talking about how able are you to do life for the most part. I mean, and some of these, when I look at these, like addiction, if somebody is an active addiction, and if I compare it to how I was when I was an addict, their ability to engage in a support group is almost non-existent, depending on how bad their addiction is, right? But there's other ones like homelessness. I actually had a client who was homeless living in their car. And I thought, well, how about if we work on some living arrangements for you first? And she goes, no, I really want to work through my abortion experience. I'm homeless. Nobody's going to be around me. I won't be interrupted. And I have nothing but time. Mm-hmm. So we really do need to meet clients where they are and listen to what their preferences are, and then assess whether or not I mean, like, she could literally sit in her car on her phone and do one-on-ones with me, and we did that. So these are just some common things that people might experience. Depression and anxiety, domestic violence. If you're not in a safe place, I think it would be really difficult to be able to participate in a support group. Unemployment, that could be the case if you're a mother and you don't have food to feed your children. And so you're spending your day trying to source food out so that you can take care of your kids while you're couch surfing from friend to friend, because you don't have the means to be able to provide yourself. I think this is just a conversation kind of question to have. If they say no, that they're not struggling with any of them, that's, probably a no-brainer. But if they say yes, then there are additional questions that we have to follow up to really get to the bottom of how much are these different kinds of stressors influencing them on a daily basis.
Absolutely. And I think there's been times in my journey where I've been so narrow focused. Somebody comes to me and says, I'm ready to dig into this. And because they said they're ready, I jumped in with them, both feet. And I lost my bearings on what is professionally necessary to jump in with both feet. Perhaps some of you understand what it's like to just meet your rock bottom and want out of there so bad that you're willing to throw yourself at everything. And the reality is that we've got to, like Karen said, take it one step at a time. And there's Maslow's hierarchy needs. We know that there's basic necessities that have to be met before you can even begin a journey to your higher self. And so in order to know that, we have to ask this question. I had some great conversations in my previous role at working with sex trafficking survivors, and we agreed that we can ask about abortion on the intake, but we're not going to revisit that conversation until their basic needs have been met and they've been sober, they've been in a healing environment for what we said 3 months, right, where they've gotten each of their meals, they've been able to get their therapy for the trauma, they've gotten some good sleep hygiene under their belt, their nutrition, right? We wanted to make sure that they were in a space that they could actually begin to receive the healing that was next for them. But there's so much that we know about our neurological system, our nervous system, and how it's so interconnected that if we start something before somebody's ready, we could do more harm. And so allow this question to be an open-ended question. Just say, where are you right now? What's going on in your life? And they say they're in the middle of a custody battle with their 3 kids. And, they just really feel like they want to get everything out so they can be the best mom and dad that they want to be. Well, let's really consider what's the priority here in your healing journey. And it might just be a no for now. It might not be that they can't start their abortion healing journey soon, but maybe there's a few things they need to do to get ready to be on that abortion healing journey.
Yeah,
you've jumped in way too soon, Karen.
I agree. And these last 2 questions are really super important as well. This is number 7 is on a Likert scale, on a scale from 1 to 4, with 1 being rarely to 4 being most of the time. How are your activities of daily living? Bathing, cooking, making the bed, doing laundry, taking out the garbage, emptying the garbage, whatever. How are the activities of daily living impacted by the symptoms or stressors of life mentioned in question 6? So 1 being rarely, 4 being most of the time. If you take your children to daycare or drop them off at school and you curl up in the fetal position on your bed and sob all day long, set an alarm and have it go off a half hour before you have to pick up your kids, and that's what your life is like, then we're thinking that maybe this isn't the right time for you to be in a support group, that you just really need some individualized care to get to the bottom of what it is that you're grieving so heavily over.
That's good, Karen. And then this last question, number 8, are your parents, spouse, partners, support network, are they aware of your interest in receiving healing? We talked about this a little briefly at the beginning, but it's so important that we know who's on board, right? If you're inviting this healing journey in and you're healing and growing, and the rest of your family, the rest of your support system isn't, that's a necessary part of the conversation for us to know as the facilitator, but also to invite that conversation for the client. And Karen, you had a great response to this in terms of that agreement that you send at the beginning, or the letter that you send. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I think it was Transforming Your Story. Don't quote me on that, but in that resource, they had a support letter that you would give to your spouse or your partner, to your children if they're age appropriate, because it's emotional. I mean, the emotional pain is real, and people get emotional and cry and stuff. And the one thing that we find so difficult with an extended period of healing is because you come to the group for an hour or 2 hours, you get all emotional, you get in touch with these sources of pain for you, and then you got to go back and be a mom, right? Or go back and cook. And so this support letter is to kind of say, you know what, I'm not going to be the mom that you're used to me being right now, because I'm working through some stuff so that I can become healthier. Will you support me in this? Like, husband, will you get takeout, or whatever that looks like in your world? But that's the idea of it, is to, will you let me go through this so that I can get to a better place and be healthier for you?
Mm-hmm. It's wonderful. And I love how you said that it's a systems issue. If mom's going to be crying more, if dad's going to be away from the house more, if there's things that are going to impact, we want to name those things, much like we talked about naming it so that we have a diagnosis, so there's a prescription. We all do better when we know what's going on. And so these follow-up questions are to support you in the journey. They're suggestions, they're not required, but these questions are here for you to help unpack these a little bit more. Listen, if there's anybody that understands that meeting with somebody is a lot different than what we just shared, it's Karen and I, right? We understand that this is a guide and it's a tool for you, but it can't be the end all. And if you're going in expecting to just read and question and check these things off, this is not going to be that tool for you. It is a guide for you to help better understand your client, to unpack their experiences so that you can help serve them in the very best way that you know how. And so here are just some follow-up questions that we recommend. It'll be a part of the email that follows up. But know that this is a guide for you so that you no longer have to walk alone on this journey, and that it's meant to be an intentional tool that guides you in helping your client find the best support. Karen, do you have any other comments to add before we open up for questions?
No, just so I can remind everybody of what these questions are. Question 3 was the question about harming yourself. So these are some of the suggestions that you could, have that conversation with them. Question 6 is about the stressors like depression and anxiety that we went on. Question 7 has to do with daily activities. So here, I think it's really good to find out how is their daily living being impacted if they're not doing laundry 3 times a week like they used to, and they're only doing it once a week. I don't know that that's a huge impact, but these are just things like Lisa said, this is really where, this is really where you have the opportunity to be present with your client, to not only listen with your ears, but listen with your eyes, if I could say it that way, to see their reactions, their facial expressions, their body language, and just, I'm going to call it Holy Spirit, like the holy prompting of the Holy Spirit, or if it's intuition, or you have that pause or that gut check, that's when another question needs to be asked. That's not the time to stop asking questions. That's the time to ask more questions.
Yeah. Yeah. And never be afraid to rely on the team that you've put together to support the clients. You are not the end all be all. And I would hope that you know that you are not the only provider in this space. There are people like you around you, and it's always good to reach out. And if you have yet to build a clinical team in your community, let this be an encouragement for you to have that connection to your community, that you would find clinicians and support people that really like to do the work that you do and can support you in that way. Some of our clients say things like, "You're the only person I've ever told, and I can't tell anybody else." I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. And through conversation, they become more comfortable talking to people because the way that I show up for them invites them into a new understanding about how other people can show up for them. And so, if they say that, yeah, that's a human response oftentimes, but please don't hear that as they're never going to tell anybody else. I would then make it your job to help open that door to the next person on that journey for them. So without further ado, Karen, we're going to turn it over to Kylie. Kylie's going to help us negotiate all of your questions. Let me remind you that we have the chat feature if you have questions. We also have the ability for you to use the hand on your screen, and we will call upon you as we see you. And we're open for any questions that you might have.
Yeah, so the first question, I'm going to invite Michael Revoir to come on. Michael, can you come on and speak?
Sure. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
But I was wondering, I put it in the chat, but whether the therapy, is that like an ongoing process? I mean, a lifetime process? And then I'm wondering how you would approach a person that's suffering and unwilling to get any help.
You want to take that, Karen?
I was going to give it to you, Lisa, since you're the clinician, but again, I think it really depends on the person, how long therapy lasts. I've been in therapy and I wasn't in it for very long, but I have been in therapy. I just really think that to answer a question generally when it's so individualized is difficult to answer. What's your experience, Lisa, as a clinician?
Yeah, I would say that we look at healing as a journey, not a destination. And so where we are today is not where we'll be 3 years from now. And the experiences that are rooted in us from the early childhood traumas that we've had come out in different seasons and spaces in our life. And so perhaps the 20-year-old that's getting ready to launch into their career might feel triggered by insecurity and goes to therapy looking to find their courage and why don't they feel secure. And then at 28, now they're looking to get married, and those are creating different, insecurities and different reasons for therapy. And all along, there's an abortion experience under the surface. And so we're only able to get as far as our awareness will allow us in those seasons. And so I agree with you, Karen, that we need to definitely take it based on the client. And then what you ask about somebody that might not be ready, we can't force people to be ready, right? And so oftentimes it's a conversation, and we call that seeding. We're planting seeds. And then maybe some fertilizer will happen from other people. And then over time, the sprout will come out and they're ready to begin talking to somebody. And so it's very, again, individualized experience, but it is based on that person's ability to say, yes, I'm ready. And sometimes it takes a very real, significant life experience for them to say, I'm ready for help.
What about like an opiate addict or like a heroin addict that are so far lost in their drug addiction, they don't really, I don't know, they probably really don't know what to do with it. I don't know.
Yeah, addiction will fog everything. And we say addiction's a symptom to much deeper roots, but until the addiction is addressed, we can't get any deeper. And so if we're looking at what comes first, second, and third, the addiction has to be addressed first. And Karen, having personally experienced addiction, how would you like to respond to Michael?
Yeah, for me, my addiction was to numb the emotional pain that I was feeling. I did not want to feel emotional pain. So it was not the right time for me to enter into something where that was going to be the case. And I'm even going to take it a step further. I've been clean and sober for a long time, but I mean, I don't even know how far after, I don't even know how to answer that when it comes to how long do you need to be clean and sober before you could do it. That's going to be based on the person's sobriety. Are you working a program? Do you have a sponsor? Are you just not drinking or using drugs? So there's a lot to go into that. That's another assessment, Lisa.
Yeah. Well, and that's why we're working so closely with a significant drug and alcohol rehab in our community, because it is one of the least discussed experiences in the addict's journey, abortion. And so we're really trying to learn from them what's going on there. They say in their recovery rooms, the two most undiscussed things are abortion and pedophilia. So we're really working on how we can begin to expose this conversation and what it could look like in recovery.
Our next question comes from Jane Abate. Jane, if you can come on.
Sure. Thank you for this great presentation. I love all that you are doing for us and for all that we're supporting. I wonder if you have any comments about the difference in readiness that you notice, or even assessing the readiness of women who've experienced the chemical abortion versus the surgical abortion.
Mhm.
Lisa, you talked about this when we were preparing. You had a great answer to this.
I don't know what that is.
That we have to meet the clients where they are, right? That I mean, if they're not ready, we can't force them to be ready. Just like if they aren't feeling a certain way, we can't force them to feel a certain way. But what I can say about it, and Lisa, you can follow up on that, is that people that are closer to their abortion, that have taken the medication abortion, present much differently than somebody that's decades removed from their abortion, that had a surgical abortion that potentially could have been anesthetized, so they don't remember really any of it. Do you want to add to that?
Absolutely. And we're seeing that the medication abortion provides such a complex level of trauma as a result, because of what you're saying. There's no medication, there's no other people around. And so, Jane, our experience is that men or women are reaching out a lot sooner, because they can't forget, they can't dismiss what they saw. They're personally experiencing what, their body's telling them all alone. And so we are seeing that men and women are reaching out much quicker after their abortion experience now. And their readiness is that they're in so much pain that they're willing to do almost anything to get out of that pain. Yeah. And so they're looking for the support right away. Now, interestingly enough, Jane, my experience, and I know you've experienced this too, is that most people in that space that I've worked with are coming to me with relationship issues as well. And it's kind of like this, which one's first? Is it the relationship issue that is, I thought I was having this abortion so I could save my relationship, right? And then we know that the abortion just causes more trauma in the relationship. And so now the relationship's shifting away. And so we find this push-pull with a lot of those clients that are coming for their abortion support, is that after we've started the abortion conversation, we quickly hear codependency, we quickly hear sexual abuse, we quickly hear lots of early childhood trauma. And so we're helping get those clients from the abortion healing experience into we call it our unraveled roots groups, but into more intentional groups dealing with those things that they also have as competing factors.
Lisa,
one of the things, I'm sorry, go ahead, Karen.
No, go ahead, Jane.
Well, I noticed in a couple of groups that I've led that because they're still so fresh in their trauma, that it becomes a little bit of a distraction for other women who are it's been further away. They don't know the experience of the chemical abortion, but they're at a different place. And that's been challenging as a group leader, to try to meet the needs of the whole group when some are still just going over and over the same things.
And so, Jane, perhaps even just taking note right now as you're listening, Jane is an expert in her space too. That first question, perhaps you ask what type of abortion you've experienced and how long ago it was, because as Jane's noting, that it matters in terms of the group cohesiveness. So I appreciate that so much, Jane. Thank you.
Lisa, one thing that we weren't able to talk about yet, and I wanted to bring it in the last couple of minutes, just because people have asked about it, is the timing. People have asked, let me just look at this real quick. Say somebody comes to your pregnancy center, they're pregnant and they had a previous abortion. Would you have them go through healing while they're pregnant? It's the questions that we've been asked. And then the other question is, how long after someone's had an abortion should they be connected to healing? Some people have suggested that to go past their due date. So just very briefly, if you could talk about the timing, because you talked about this when we were preparing, and I thought it was a really good answer.
Absolutely. And so, we've had a lot of kind of stringent rules, if you will, in the abortion healing space. And I would submit to you that we need to become more client focused in this space and less rigid about the rules. And so if a client is a pregnancy center client and they are in a space where they are ready to receive the support for a healing program related to their abortion, there should be no reason why we can't support them on that journey. And if you are providing wraparound services with the mental health services and your parenting support and these sort of things, it is only going to help them attach to their next living child in a way that they wouldn't be able to attach with that trauma connected to it from their abortion experience. So, but there again, we need to go back to that assessment and say, where else are you? What other things do you have going on? Because if you have other things going on, this might not be the right time. To the second point, or the second part of your conversation, Karen, do we have to wait 1 year post-abortion where that we would then provide? And I would say absolutely not. We have found that there are some people that are ready right away, that they went into the abortion experience not really wanting to experience it, and then they just came out even worse. Why would we wait a year to have somebody go through all of that pain and all of that trauma, find another numbing mechanism, then meet it head on in that moment? Now, the group that they start a month after their abortion is not likely the same group that they will experience 5 years from now. But remember, healing is a journey, not a destination. So we're going to meet clients right where they are and then grow into a deeper healing program as they're ready. And I have found working with clients that we don't do any harm if a client is ready and willing and wants to start the process. In fact, upon the due date of their child, they're more ready to embrace that experience with a healing mentality than they are feeling that devastated, depressive state.
Well said. Thank you.
So we have 4 questions left. I have Kirk, who's had his hand up the longest.
Hi, Kirk.
Hello, everybody. I wanted to share with you about a therapist situation that I had long before I ever admitted and sought help for my abortion experience. I was not well, like so many folks are that are dealing with this. And I was seeing a therapist, and bless her heart, she was so attentive to me. And she was really trying to help me get to the root of it. And she kept asking me if I had any childhood sexual abuse in my past, which I did not. But she kept asking, not just day after day after day, or session after session rather, but she would circle back to it. And I got a little irritated by that. And I kept telling her, no, I'm not trying to hide anything like that. It's not that. But she was this close. It was a sexual issue. She just never asked about abortion. And years after I saw that therapist, and years even after I had sought help for my abortion, I was reflecting on that experience, and it occurred to me she was this close. So I contacted her and let her know, you did a great job trying to help me. And I did have a sexual experience that was causing my struggle. You just never asked about abortion. And I certainly wasn't raising my hand to talk about it at that time in my life. So all that to say, when I'm working with folks, I let them know, if you've worked with a therapist and you have found healing through Surrendering the Secret or any abortion recovery care, go back and tell your therapist that they conference, that they network. We need to let these people know when you think it might be a sexual issue, don't overlook abortion. Thank you.
Kirk, it's going to be recorded. Listen to that time and again. Our industry is not doing a great job in training licensed professionals about abortion. When I went to go renew my CEUs for my license, there wasn't any topics related to abortion. This narrative, it's still falling in the political and religious narratives. It has yet to fall deeply into the clinical space. And so Kirk is exactly right. We have an industry that is lacking the training on how to broach this topic. So Kirk, thank you so much.
Prinny, you're next.
Hey, Trimmy. You're muted, Trimmy. We can't hear you.
Sorry. I just wanted to share a little bit of our experience on these topics that we've been talking about. And as far as the client group readiness assessment, we don't have exactly the same thing, but we do have something to guide us. But what my suggestion is for those of you that are newer is that you try to get their story first. And that's what we do. We do an intake. And many times as they're telling their story, some of these questions are answered. And other times we can do a follow-up for it. So it doesn't sound like you just wrote going through all these, questions and answers and all that. And it has been our experience. I've been doing this. My healing was in 2000, and I've been helping or assisting with PATH ever since then. That my experience is that I've forgotten where I was going with this. I'm so sorry. Well, let me go back to the next topic is we don't, and we've heard different opinions from different professionals and different support groups on this, but we don't turn anybody away that wants healing. Our feeling is that if they've come here and they're ready to bare their soul, if they only get 5% of the healing that we know they can possibly get, that's the 5% that they need right now in their journey. So sometimes we've had people go through a retreat or a Bible study, and then years later, they go through it again. Mm-hmm. So it's a question of meeting people, where they're at. We want to get whatever they can at that moment. We want to be able to give that to them.
Thank you, Trini. That's exactly right. I appreciate the progressiveness that you have inside your facility.
Lori?
Thank you. Just a couple things I thought of. Kirk, that was amazing. Thank you. Appreciate that so much. One thing I was thinking is it's important to differentiate. I think I'm not a licensed counselor, Lisa, so you can check me on this, but I think there are differences between support groups that are meeting weekly and biweekly compared to, say, a retreat environment as far as someone's readiness. Whereas, support groups, maybe there's more interaction between the participants with one another, speaking into one another's life versus, say, a weekend retreat where it's really more of an individualized, even though people are together, the care that participant is getting, it is more individual. So I think that's important to consider with that. My second quick point is I appreciate the assessment tool and how you all said it's a guide. I mean, that's what it is, because looking at it, I'm looking at it and I filled it out kind of like with what we see with a lot of our Deeper Still participants, and that rating or the score came out to 12, 13, and many of those people that we have had scoring that high still reap great benefits from a weekend retreat. So
Yeah. And I think that maybe we've landed on a topic that we could bring back, the difference between groups and retreats and maybe the benefits and some things to be considerate of. It's that in-person being with others that I think we really want to address today. It does have different components. There's different ways in which we support people, but we really have to assess for when and if somebody is ready to be with others. Can they respect that environment, or are they so narrow focused on their experiences that they won't be able to be in an environment where you really require to have empathy for others. You really require to be able to negotiate the community that you're in. And those are all things that, when we have trauma and it's right in front of us, it's hard for us to have those things available to us. So maybe that's a conversation, Karen, that we can have in another meeting. I think that'd be good, Lori.
really great feedback, Lisa. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Kylie, I know we're reaching our 1 o'clock time. How would you like to handle the rest of the questions?
Sorry. Are we going to keep on being able to talk, or just by email? You think it's better if we close the
Carly, you have a question, or are you going to add a point?
question?
Great, go for it.
Okay. So I'm going to try to be short. I have been in for several years in spiritual formation for inner healing. And so I believe I have the formation to help someone into the inner healing area. My own healing in abortion, it started 5 years ago in a one-on-one session. However, when I see you talking, Lisa, I know you're extremely prepared to handle things that I'm definitely not there yet. However, I hear Karen, and Karen gives me a lot of hope that yes, there's still good can be done without me having all these licenses that are going to take me so many years. I've been also in 12 steps groups, religious and non-religious. So I guess my question is, someone like me with this background that I believe it's most of us people in the church that we want to help, we have some preparation of inner healing. What's the next step? Not to harm, but to start helping.
I think it starts with your own understanding of where your strengths lie and where your weaknesses are, right? You know, I'm learning what it is to be a coach in our world these days. And so as a clinician going into this space, the biggest thing I hear in the training is you need to know what you're there for with your client and what you're not there for. So as a coach, you're there to help them move forward towards a goal. You're not there to go backwards into the past pain. And so each of you listening, if you are not well aware of what you are gifted with, what you are talented with, what strengths you bring to a client situation, I would say that's the first step to your question, Carla. This is what I am gifted. This is what I'm here to help clients with. And if anything falls outside of that space, we want you to have a team of people that say, okay, that's past sexual trauma. That is a space I'm not ready to be involved in. I have a person for that. Or this is an addiction issue, a pornography issue, right? These sort of things, that's an issue. And this is inviting even another topic that, Carla, there's things in our life that we have yet dealt with. And if we're walking in with a client and we haven't dealt with it ourselves, we can do more harm than good. And so understanding when we don't feel comfortable, that's our mind, our body, our spirit's way of saying, whoop, stop, listen to it, and let's make sure that we don't do more harm with that client than good.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's a wrap, Lisa.
All right. Well, it has been an absolute joy. I think we have 2 more topics to bring to all of you. I think Lori said it best, actually, that this is a guide. Please take it with you, practice with one another, perhaps, and provide us with any feedback that you might have as you're negotiating these experiences. But don't try to do this alone anymore. Don't try to negotiate these conversations. Make sure that you're really being intentional to keep it going. We, on behalf of Karen and I and my team, we are just so grateful that you joined us today in June. This has never happened. We're so thrilled, and we'll see you next month. Have a great day.